In the meantime, have a great weekend. The weather forecast today is going to be mainly cloudy. The visibility is rather low, sunny periods during the day, with a maximum temperature of about 25 degrees and light winds. The outlook, humid with fog in the next few days, warm during the day, and then a few showers on Sunday and on the Qingming Festival. The temperature right now in Hong Kong is 19 degrees centigrade. The relative humidity is 86%. Time now for the half-hour news with Judd Boas.
North Korea has been dominating a summit on nuclear security in Washington. Xinhua news agency says President Xi Jinping has told his American counterpart Barack Obama that all sides need to avoid words and deeds that could escalate tensions on the Korean peninsula. President Obama says China and the United States will work together to try prevent further missile tests by the North.
Of great importance to both of us is North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons, which threatens the security and stability of the region. And President Xi and I are both committed to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and full implementation of UN sanctions. So we're going to discuss how we can discourage action like nuclear and missile tests that escalate tensions and violate international obligations.
China and the US say they will both sign the Paris Climate Agreement next month. The declaration will give impetus to steps to turn last year's deal on fighting climate change into an operational treaty. This report from the BBC's Matt McGrath.
Supported by almost 200 nations late last year, the Paris Climate Agreement is the most significant step yet taken to tackle the causes and effects of global climate change. But to make the deal operational, a majority of nations must now sign and ratify the document. The UN has invited world leaders to come and do this in New York next month. Those efforts will have been given a huge boost by today's announcement. China and the US together are responsible for almost 40% of global emissions, and if others follow their lead, the Paris deal will be significantly strengthened.
The director of Beijing's liaison office says the formation of a political party advocating Hong Kong's independence has exceeded free speech. Zhang Xiaoming says the matter has touched on the bottom line of the one country, two systems principle and can't be tolerated. Earlier this week, Beijing praised SAR officials for refusing to allow the new Hong Kong National Party to register as a company. NPC deputy and EXCO member Bernard Chan says talk of independence only harms the SAR.
It's not helpful to bring up this sort of rhetoric because it's certainly not helpful in addressing some of the challenges that we are facing between the mainland and Hong Kong in some of these disputes. So I think rather than emphasizing on the independence of Hong Kong, we should emphasize on how to deal with these problems arising from the integrations.
You're listening to the news on RTHK.
Good morning. Welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chewerton, your co-host today, Danny Gittings. Danny, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Our main question this morning, should the Hong Kong National Party be allowed? Beijing has said the establishment of the pro-independence party endangers the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong and agrees that the party should not be registered. The government has responded in Hong Kong by saying that any suggestion that Hong Kong should be independent is against the Basic Law and the SAR government will take action according to the law. But in the absence of laws on secession, part of the Article 23 bundle, what sort of action is possible here? Is it really a violation of the Basic Law? And if so, is it against the law? Is it a crime to talk about independence without actually taking actions? If it does threaten national security, should it escape prosecution? We have laws on sedition. Are they applicable here or are they outdated? Do we need Article 23? Email us with your thoughts, questions, comments. Our address, backchat@rthk.hk. Our Facebook page is Backchat on RTHK Radio 3. You can comment there or call us. 233-88266 is the number. After 9:20, we're talking about public screening and the image of the film 10 Years. Joining us for our discussion, we have with us Avery Ng, who's chairman of the League of Social Democrats, Lawrence Ma, who's a barrister and chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, and Professor Carol Peterson, professor of law at the University of Hawaii, formerly professor of law in Hong Kong. Good morning to all of you. Lawrence Ma, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
The government has said that they will take action according to the law on this independence party. The Hong Kong National Party. What sort of action do you think might be possible?
Well, I would directly think about the crimes ordinance, if you want to mention that, because that's the only in Section 9 of the crimes ordinance and Section 10 are provisions that are actually target seditious intention. So if the action or the movement of the National Party is to proclaim independence for Hong Kong or to advance the cause of independence for Hong Kong, I think those provisions would be aptly applicable to that situation.
Lawrence Ma, we should clarify here, shouldn't we? The provisions you're talking about are very old provisions. I mean, Carol Peterson can correct me, but I think they may be more than 100 years old. They still, although there are ways of reading them to refer to today, they still refer to the British Queen and so on. They've never been tested against the Basic Law and Bill of Rights.
Correct,
we don't know if they would stand up. Would be extremely difficult, quite apart from the political implications. Just as a matter of law, would be extremely difficult to prosecute someone under them.
I agree, yes. Section 9 was drafted in 1938, amended twice in 1970 and 63.
Yeah. Yes. And not only that, of course, the government, in its own Article 23 legislation, proposed replacing these with other provisions which would have been much more tightly drawn, although people still thought they weren't tightly drawn enough.
Could you, just before we go on, could you clarify something maybe, Danny? Because if you look these up, as I did, as a non-lawyer and everything, on the internet, this Section 9 and Section 10, it's all about the Queen. Yes. And it's all about the government and the Queen and her successors and heirs and things like this, and the government of the UK.
Well, the point is, of course.
So what's going on? Why?
Well, when we crossed from British rule to in 1997, we had laws that were full of references to Britain and the Queen and so on, and you can't change them all immediately. So rules of interpretation were put in place that where it says Britain, you either read that as China or Hong Kong. Where it says governor, they read as chief executive, and then those rules are used until the relevant law is changed, because we never got our new Article 23 laws. The old laws in this case are one of the few, there's still a few others, are still in place, and you have to try and read them by substituting words, but sometimes that works, sometimes it's quite difficult.
Okay, so yeah, go on, Lawrence Ma.
Yeah, that's the first point that people raise. I agree with Danny. That now, if this is involving Hong Kong independence, that is a kind of affairs for which the central government has responsibility, or involves the relationship between the central authority and Hong Kong special administrative region, and because of that, the word Her Majesty should now be read to mean the central people's government. So to incorporate that into reading Section 9, which means that if the National Party is to bring hatred or contempt or to excite dissatisfaction against the central people's government, then it is a seditious intention. But that is not to say Section 9 is not a toothless tiger. It is still a toothless tiger because of subsection 2. Because if the party is to point out errors or defects in the government or the constitution of Hong Kong by law established, which means that if they say that Section 1 is wrong because of, for example, I'm not sure, because in 1949 when New China government was established, Hong Kong was not part of it, for example. Then it is pointing out errors in the Basic Law, particularly Article 1. Now, that would bring those National Party people into the exception, as in Section 2.
So what you're basically saying is there's the defence that, and so that even this provision couldn't be successfully used against the National Party. So
it would be difficult unless you can show that the defence in Section 2 could not be made out.
So let's just step back from that. That's a very helpful explanation of the wording of the law, Lawrence Marr, but let's step back from the wording of the law. And what you're saying more broadly is that there's no provision under existing law that could be used against the actions of the Hong Kong National Party. And then does that then mean that you think that the law should be changed and that we should have new legislation?
Well, yes, it would be difficult to prosecute under Section 9 and 10 and apply to the current situation, yes.
So do you think we should have new legislation then?
Oh, we have a constitutional responsibility to enact laws under Article 23.
And you think this means we need this means we need to revisit the debate on Article 23?
Well, it's been ongoing for times, and it's just difficult. I mean, people won't accept it.
Carol Peterson, good morning to you from the University of Hawaii.
Good morning.
Thank you much indeed for joining us. This strikes some people as a bit of a legal loophole, to be quite honest. If you had a party, if you have a group which threatens the integrity of the country, that's a direct threat in many respects to national security. You'd think that there should be some way to stop it.
Oh, I don't agree that it's a threat to national security for someone to talk about independence. I mean, sorry, but I think that's a little silly. People talk about independence of Hawaii all the time, and nobody says it's a threat to national security.
Carol Peterson, to be fair, they say they're going to do rather more than talk. I mean, they say they'll use any necessary means.
Well,
they've already talked about maybe it'd be a good idea to start using tear gas inside the Legislative Council chambers and punching people and so on. So that they're not talking. They're not saying that it's going to be confined to verbal advocacy.
Sure, but hold on. If they were to do those actions, if they were to punch someone, then you do have laws. So there's no legal loophole here. And that's my point. If you're claiming that there's a legal loophole because there's no law in Hong Kong to punish someone for talking about the possibility of independence, I don't see that as a legal loophole because, in fact, that is protected speech under both the Basic Law and the ICCPR. And the Bill of Rights Ordinance.
But
so
the distinction,
loophole.
surely the distinction...
Just let me finish. I do agree, though, that this political party, if they're forming a political party, they should be very careful not to advocate for violence. And that's in my opinion, a huge mistake. The quote that said, we'll take any means necessary to accomplish this or to gain attention for our goals, that's a big mistake. And they should be advised not to say things like that because it does put them at risk of some accusation that they may be trying to incite violence.
Isn't it a bit of a red herring to try and draw a line between what people saying something, advocating something, and people doing something? Because when you look at the law on sedition, for example, if you urge a course of action, if you it's considered an act if you utter something or if you publish something. So it doesn't really matter. There's no real difference between saying something and doing something when it comes to an action like this, an event like this.
Well, it all depends on what you're advocating be done. For example, if I were to write an article advocating that the people of Hong Kong be allowed to hold a referendum, a plebiscite, on whether they wish to be independent of China, I'm not advocating for anything violent. I'm advocating for a negotiation process, something along the lines of what happened in Scotland. I'm advocating that the people of Hong Kong be given a choice. I'm not saying they would be getting a choice, but what am I doing? How am I threatening national security by just suggesting that? So I do think there is a huge difference between advocating for a result that could be achieved peacefully through negotiations, perhaps in 2047.
But when you look at the law on sedition, there's nothing about being peaceful or not being peaceful, or being violent or not being violent. That's irrelevant.
I don't think the example I just gave you would be sedition. Yeah. It's perfectly possible for someone to suggest that there might be a better constitutional framework for Hong Kong. That can be suggested without committing sedition, even as defined under that old ordinance, which I'm quite sure is mostly unenforceable now because of the ICCPR and the Basic Law. I mean, what's sad about the whole
just
situation
follow up on that, Carol Peterson. You think if someone was prosecuted under those old provisions that Basic Law and International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights defences would be sufficient, so the court would hold that this law can...
Right. I'm not saying that the court would necessarily throw out all of the ordinance, but I think if someone were prosecuted for simply speaking and advocating peacefully for Hong Kong to be independent, if someone were prosecuted under the existing crimes ordinance, under Section 9 and 10 now, I believe that prosecution would be unsuccessful, because if the government were to argue for an interpretation that would prohibit that, I think the court would say that violates the freedom of expression protected by the Basic Law, as well as protected under the Bill of Rights ordinance. Oh. And I think Fu Hualing has written extensively on this, on the old sedition laws in the book that we co-edited on the Article 23 legislation back in 2005. And even the government admitted openly that the old provisions in the crimes ordinance in Section 9 and 10 were not enforceable as written. So I just don't think there's any question. Now, it does potentially change, however, if someone is to advocate for violence, because then there are other ordinances as well that might be used.
Yes, but the point is, that they want to prosecute under national security offences where the punishment can be more severe, can't it?
We don't have national security offences in Hong Kong. And Article 23 itself in the Basic Law does not create criminal penalties. It simply empowers and directs the local legislature to enact those offences, but they've never done so. So there's no law.
Wasn't that one of the grounds of...
there's no law.
The concern about Article 23 legislation was that the penalties, if you were prosecuted under Article 23 legislation, could have been much more severe than being prosecuted under other legislation, maybe for assault or something like that. If it's assault for...
Sure, I agree, but those laws are not there. Yeah. If you're describing that as a legal loophole, if that's what you meant by that, I think if you go back and look at the government's proposals, particularly in light of the amendments that they accepted in June 2003, you'll find that even the government was agreeing that there had to be something more than pure speech in order to prosecute someone, whether it be for subversion or sedition. There had to be either some action or some incitement toward action. So mere speech, I still don't think, would have been prosecuted even under those provisions, although
but incitement,
Okay,
but incitement to action would be done through speech.
Yes, it could be incitement to violence. I mean, the best example, if you want to look at an ordinance in Hong Kong that does prohibit, put some limitations on speech, is Section 46 of the Race Discrimination Ordinance, which creates the criminal offense of serious vilification on the grounds of race. So that's one of the rare situations where speech, if you are using that speech to incite violence against a person on the grounds of their race, could be the basis of a prosecution. But we don't have, we don't have the kind of offense in Hong Kong law now that would allow a prosecution simply for someone peacefully advocating for Hong Kong's independence. It simply doesn't exist, in my opinion. Okay. I think what's unfortunate about this, though, is that it's diverting attention from what I think is a much more serious, true violation of the Basic Law, and that's what happened to Li Bo, and the fact that there is no answer about what happened to these booksellers. And in my opinion, it is that kind of disillusionment with one country, two systems, which is inspiring young people in Hong Kong to suggest these things. And I think it would be much better if parties on both sides backed down a little bit and took more of a conflict resolution approach to this, because this sort of statement by this group is just escalating the situation to, I think, politically a very dangerous situation.
Okay, Avery, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Just following up on that last point, surely Professor Peterson is right, and the consequence is really that we should get Article 23 now before it gets any worse. And if we accepted the final form that the government proposed in 2003, we wouldn't be in this mess and it wouldn't be getting worse like this.
Well, then it depends on your definition of what's worse. We have to step back and think about the idea of independence, whether you agree with it or not. Is the idea of independence a bad idea? would that really threaten the livelihood of the well-beings of Hong Kong people or China?
What's your view, Avery? Are you against independence?
No, actually, I'm not against independence. Nor do I am for independence, because I believe that this discussion or the under the current political climate and the geopolitical situation and the historical context, I don't think it is achievable or practical at this point in time.
So you say it's not realistic?
Yeah, it's just not realistic.
You're not necessarily against it.
Yeah,
just from a realistic point of view.
Yeah, it is.
But from a realistic point of view, what is the consequence? What happens if you advocate for independence? What will be the result?
No, but again, I have to step back and say, at this point, I believe that for Hong Kong National Party, I don't know who they are and what they're truly advocating for in terms of their agendas and how they're going to go about achieving the independence. But the mere talks of independence or the discussion of independence should be allowed in Hong Kong.
So it sounds like you don't take this Hong Kong National Party very seriously.
No, I don't.
Why not?
Because it's just one guy.
No, there was two of them at the press conference.
Two.
And then they say they have some other support.
All right.
And a lot of political groups in Hong Kong are very small. I mean, so...
But the thing is, they have the right, freedom of speech and freedom of thoughts to discuss these sort of ideas. But until they have some sort of a plan. I mean, I don't even want to call it a plan, just some sort of idea on how to achieve their goal, then, let's wait and see and let the discussions happen.
Well, we have to introduce Article 23 legislation and the basic law. Isn't it better to do it sooner rather than later before things
that's the thing that I was...
Before things get more heated. You do it in a crisis, you're not going to get a good result.
But that's what the point that I'm trying to get at. What's so wrong or worse, or is it a bad thing to have independence? That's the discussion that I believe a small part of Hong Kong people are trying to get to. Now, if we cannot tolerate this type of discussion, I mean, and simply just say, well, independence is just wrong and is breaking the law and it should be banned or even jailed, then I don't think it is a society that I want to see, where there's this limited freedom of expression and speech. Now,
that's not answering the question. The question is about Article 23.
No, but then I'm about Article 23. For one, personally, we have to step back again and say that the reason why so many people were against the legislation for Article 23 back in, 10 years ago or more than a decade ago, was simply that Hong Kong people do not trust the Chinese government, period. Article 23, Article 23, if enacts correctly, yes, it can provide national security. But then the thing is, say, for example, Li Bo, or for example, Liu Xiaobo, classic example that if Article 23 were to legislate and enact in Hong Kong, who can give us the guarantee that you or me or Danny wouldn't be the next Li Bo or Liu Xiaobo for simply advocating, like, for example, Liu Xiaobo, for simply advocating amendment or discussion of the Constitution, which is allowed. So we shouldn't. So, given the historical context and the current political tension between China and Hong Kong, and then also the current ruling the ruling class in the Chinese government, I don't think we should jump to the conclusion and say that, there's some guys talking about independence already.
All right, well, let's put that to Lawrence Ma. Mr. Marsh, why shouldn't we be allowed to talk about this?
Well, the reality is, under the law in Hong Kong, we are allowed to talk about it. Unless you're being caught by the old legislation under Section 9 of the Crimes Ordinance. Otherwise, I would have thought that you are currently allowed to talk about it. I don't see why we can't talk about it. But to talk about it, whether it has it bears fruit at the end is another matter, because it's impossible. I would use the word impossible for independence to be achieved in Hong Kong.
Lawrence Ma, you're saying you're agreeing you can talk about it. That's not what Zhang Xiaoming, the liaison office director, has said. He said talking about it crosses beyond the boundary of freedom of speech.
Well, talking about it would...
You don't agree with him there, right? He's
not
fully understanding what freedom of speech constitutes in Hong Kong.
Well, I understand what he means is if you talk about things that would contravene the basic law, that would not be agreed upon. That's a political stance.
That's a political stance.
That is a political stance.
You're talking about political stance rather than the legal stance, because of course there's nothing to stop you advocating something.
Not under the law in Hong Kong, unless it falls within Section 9. But obviously, Section 9 is problematic.
So you say that mainland officials really, and people saying this kind of thing, they're taking a political stance rather than a legal stance, because...
I would agree. I would think so, yes.
And there's no real, just possibly this old provision, but we think it's very unlikely, there's no real legal avenue against someone...
There's no criminal offence against that. That's a problem. There is law against independence, which is Article 1 of the...
You said there's no criminal offence, that's the problem. Are you suggesting that you think that there should be a criminal offence?
Well, there should be a criminal offence against sedition, of course. And which is, I would have thought that Article 29 would encompass that. Yeah. Obviously, Article 23.
Yes,
23, yeah.
I mean, the basic law is not a law.
It's not a criminal offence.
It's not an ordinance.
Constitution.
It's a
constitution. But I want to add in a point there. When we discuss this, constitution, legislation, or the thought of independence, or a country or a society's sovereignty, given the historical context of Hong Kong, it is a bit difficult to bring the usual definition or discussion of these ideas from the Western society. The fact that, sedition is a crime, threatening national security is a crime, but the Constitution of the United States or many other Western countries, those constitutions or the legislations were empowered and enacted mostly or nowadays through a democratic process. Now, with Hong Kong, with the Sino-British Joint Agreement and then subsequently the Basic Law, the people of Hong Kong, most of us, were not involved or at least did not give the mandate to have the Basic Law enacted. So that's the problem, given the historical context. Out of the 7 million residents of Hong Kong, none of us were given the chance to input onto the Basic Law and again on this discussion. So we have to step back and so this is a political discussion rather than a legal discussion, I believe.
Avery, I think we got 200 odd representative or delegates from Hong Kong. No, not say thanks, but to put it correct. Avery, when you say when no Hong Kong people were involved, well, I'm telling you that over 200 delegates.
Thank you for the clarification, but that's exactly the problem. 200 people out of 7 million.
I thought what you're saying is after the Basic Law has been drafted by and approved, Hong Kong, the 5 million people at that time has not voted to consent. That's what you're trying to say.
It is, yeah.
But when you say there's no one in Hong Kong is involved, I think that's...
All right, okay. Sorry, I correct. It's 200 out of 5 million at that time. But
including Martin Lee and people like that.
I'm not quite sure where this figure of 200 is coming from. There were only 59 people on the drafting committee.
But there's a consultative committee too.
Slightly ancient history. But anyway, okay, let's break now for the news at 9 o'clock and continue the discussion in 3 minutes' time. Interesting email from Holden as well about in colonial times what was the situation then as well, which perhaps we'll get to in a few minutes. Also, we're going to be talking later about a public screening screening, a large-scale public screening across Hong Kong, which is happening today of the this evening of the movie 10 Years. We'll be talking about that movie. So drop us a line, backchat@rthk.hk, with your take. The weather before the news, mainly cloudy today, I'm afraid. Sunny periods and rather low visibility forecast during the day. The maximum temperature about 26 degrees with light winds. The outlook humid with fog in the next few days. A few showers on Sunday at the Qingming Festival. 21 degrees now, humidity 87%. Welcome back. This is Backchat on a Friday morning, the 1st of April, but we're not joking this morning. We're talking about independence in Hong Kong. This is on the back of the forming, or the attempt to form, a Hong Kong National Party which advocates independence for Hong Kong from the People's Republic. The government and Beijing has said that legal action would be appropriate to stop them in some way. But what actually could happen? We have with us Professor Carol Peterson from the University of Hawaii, from the University of Hong Kong. Lawrence Ma is a barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, and Avery Ng, who's chairman of the Legal Social Democrats. Your co-host today is Danny Gittings. My name's Hugh Chiverton. Our address, backchat@rthk.hk. Later we're going to be talking about that movie 10 Years. There's going to be some screening this evening in various locations around Hong Kong, and we'll be talking about the movie later in the programme. Do join us if you'd like to comment. You can also call us on 233-88266. A couple of interesting comments. Tom, thank you very much indeed. In email, Tom says, no one could truly appreciate the 831 decision from Beijing of not giving Hong Kong genuine democratic election, and CY Leung government desperately poor handling of the situation until the more recent times, with the emergency of civil unrest and more radical ideations to gain political freedom from Beijing. I think the moderate democratic voices had been correct with regard to what Hong Kong generally needs for its prosperity and survival in the last decades. However, with the Pandora's jar has now been smashed completely open, no one could see a way out except perhaps to reflect on what could have been if the promise of the genuine democratic elections were implemented in accordance to the basic law from the Democrats, or making the complex situation even more volatile, with more oppression, deception and suppression from the Beijing and their shoe-shining loyalists. God help us, says Tom. Tom, thanks very much indeed for that. Holden says, Dear professionals, sorry for my ignorance. In the good old days of Hong Kong under the British administration, was the Communist Party allowed by the law? Cheers. That comes from Holden.
Well, the answer is that very simple. The Communist Party has never registered under the law, whether you call it the good old days or now, right? Communist Party does not exist as a legal entity in Hong Kong because it's never registered, or as far as we know, tried to register.
Is it banned? Was it banned under colonial authority? Do you know?
That I'm not so sure. Carol Peterson, whether there were any laws specifically against the Communist Party, but I mean, more to the point is it just doesn't have any lawful existence, because you want to be an organisation that you have to register either for the company or society.
Well, yeah, under the company's ordinance, we don't have a law on political parties in Hong Kong. I think it would be a good idea if we had one, but we don't.
Yeah. So. Do you know?
I don't know if the Communist Party was banned in Hong Kong in colonial days. I honestly don't know.
Yeah. In effect, it was banned.
Well, I mean, again, if you're not registered, you are banned, because you can only be a lawful organisation if you register. Anyone who's not registered is effectively banned.
Okay. Talking on the registration, Jalal says it's appalling and wrong that the Hong Kong National Party was denied registration. Democracy means we allow debate and discussion of ideas, even bad ideas. In particular, calls to change the law should not be stifled, even if we disagree. Unless they incite violence, they should be allowed to participate in our political system. Shame on the Hong Kong government for shutting them out of the debate.
Maybe here we follow up on that has raised Carol Peterson. That raises some important points, doesn't it? Because of course, as you were saying just now, they haven't so far tried to register as a society. They've tried to register as a company, effectively as a business, and different rules apply to that. I mean, well,
most political parties in Hong Kong, that's how they register, under the company's ordinance. The thing is, it is possible for the registrar to deny registration if the purpose of the company is unlawful. But that's the whole question, and that's why I commented earlier that I think it's very important. If the group wants to be registered, they should be very careful not to make the kinds of statements that they were quoted as making. I wasn't there, but they were quoted in the South China Morning Post as saying that they were not against using violence if it would help them to get attention, and that is worrying. And I think it would be possible for a government official to say we're going to deny registration on that basis. But that's the question: is the real purpose of the proposed organization unlawful, or were these just some comments that were perhaps made in the heat of the moment? So we really don't know at this point.
And my understanding also... sorry, go on, Carol Peterson.
I said they can't seek review, of course, of the refusal to register them.
Yeah. And my understanding also is that the Registrar of Companies can deny registration if he considers the name is offensive or contrary to the public interest, which, of course, can be defined very generally. So, I mean, you don't have an absolute right to register any name you like under the company's ordinance. Shouldn't they turn to society's ordinance and try and... You don't find their name offensive?
Yeah, I don't find their name contrary to the public interest, but some people might, but I don't.
Yeah. Would you recommend they try and register as a society instead and test that law? I mean, then you could...
I think that they should clarify what their purpose is before they start trying to register as anything. I'd like to go back, if I could, for just a moment to your comment earlier that maybe it's a good time now to adopt legislation implementing Article 23 rather than waiting for a crisis. I think the problem is we are already in a crisis, and I think that the Li Bo matter has to be resolved. As one of the other speakers commented, the people of Hong Kong did not trust the mainland Chinese government in 2003, and that's why Article 23 legislation was not eventually implemented. The people of Hong Kong, I suspect, are far less trusting of the central government now after the Li Bo incident. That's one of the most sacred principles of the Basic Law in One Country, Two Systems, is that mainland Chinese public security authorities are not supposed to have any authority to act in Hong Kong. And people are supposed to be safe in Hong Kong and understand that their freedom of expression is protected as long as they're in Hong Kong.
Carol Peterson, the problem is we still have no proof of that, don't we? I mean, I understand the suspicions and I share them, but there is no proof. And when the individual himself denies it, it makes it even more difficult.
I completely agree with you, but that's the point. I think virtually everyone who has listened to his statements believes that he's terrified, and that he's terrified that something will happen either to him or to his family or to his colleagues on the mainland. And not only is he terrified of the mainland authorities, he has absolutely no confidence that the Hong Kong government can protect him. That is the crisis that we're in right now. And I think that if that crisis is not resolved, then there will be more groups like this, because people are going to feel despondent. They're going to feel that things couldn't get worse. In fact, I think they could get worse, because under Article 18 of the Basic Law, if you read the last paragraph, it does say that if Hong Kong is in a situation of turmoil, right, that endangers national security and is beyond the control of the government of the region, then the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress could have the power to issue an order applying national laws in the region. That's really scary, and that's why we don't want to go further down this path. That's why any organization that wants to advocate for democracy or for independence or anything has to be crystal clear that they are only advocating for peaceful means and that they're not considering violence. Because if they do, they put the security of everyone in Hong Kong at risk, in my opinion.
All right, Lawrence Marr, what do you think about Article 23? Do you think now is a good time? This is a reason to bring forward the enactment of Article 23 legislation?
Well, if you see it from the angle of the growing attention or the force of Hong Kong independence, then it is a good time, vis-a-vis the timing probably in 2003. Because of the lack of Article 23, I think Hong Kong independence will further categorize, and the situation will go further. I would have thought there would be more people voicing out for independence, and people would start to do other things to promulgate Hong Kong independence. As to whether today is the best time or in 2 years' time will be the best time, I would have thought that the earlier the better, because the law is to curb these sort of things from happening. Yes, so I think this is a good time.
Okay, comments on our Facebook page. TC says the Hong Kong National Party is a litmus test on whether a community does respect the freedom of speech. One of the things I find impressive about Canada is that political parties advocating for the separation of Quebec can exist and run for elected offices, both federally and provincially, just like any political parties operating in Canada. Henry says, I'm not sure why the National Party wants to have Hong Kong independent. Surely they know that the mainland would crush any real effort to turn Hong Kong independent, which means theirs is only an impossible dream. That is against the basic law, is crystal clear. I believe that since the objective of the party is ultra-virus, the basic law, they should not be accorded protection in the name of freedom of speech. Moreover, such discussion only helps to engender separatist movements, which is only bad for Hong Kong to grow. They're not conducive to growth. In fact, many of the localism groups are actually pro-dependent groups in disguise. I doubt if they know how to run Hong Kong, even in a hypothetical scenario when they win. Article 23 may not be that important here, as according to basic law, Beijing could declare some mainland laws to be applicable to Hong Kong when required, says Henry. Thank you very much indeed for that comment. Avery, you were nodding when Henry was saying that some of the
You don't think much of some of these groups, Avery, do you?
No, I don't.
I mean, we think of you as a radical, or perhaps we used to think of you as a radical pan-democrat.
I am still radical.
But these groups are more radical than you?
I do not consider these groups radical, most of these.
Why not?
For one, whether they are advocating independence or some of the localist groups or have some specific demands. First of all, they do not they talk the talk, but don't really do the do, if you can say that.
Well, they were out in Mongkok, weren't they? Attacking policemen and so on.
Well, the thing is, they do not claim that that's their actions. And secondly, most of these groups, their main cause fuel mostly by hatred and fear. And
you say you think they're playing on hatred and fear?
Yes. Of course, and playing on the conflicts between Hong Kong and China, exploiting
the situation in Hong Kong.
Yes, exactly. So and then they do not really have a clear a roadmap or a list of demands that they want to achieve.
Plenty of young people in Hong Kong supporting them these days.
Yeah. That's the thing. It is very easy to blur the line between radical and just pure passionate demagogue. Yeah. So for me, I believe we are on a dangerous path. The conflict, the dissatisfaction towards the society felt by mostly the youth in Hong Kong, unless we can provide a clear roadmap and solutions to alleviate the situation and give us more freedom and democracy, then this situation or these acts of perceived radicalism, which is not, will continue.
All right, our number is 233-88266. We've got a caller on the line now. I think it's Bowen. Bowen, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi. Your comment?
I just like to, I've been listening to what we're discussing from the start of the program, and I think, well, personally, I do not support the independence for Hong Kong, but I think that people's freedom to discuss and to talk about these things should be protected if we treasure a mature and open society, that is. And I've lived in where I just want to share my experience in another part of the world where I lived. I used to live in a part of Canada where there was a separatist movement, a pretty strong one, and it's not Quebec. It's Alberta. Back in the 1980s, there was formed the so-called Western Canada concept, which advocated separation of not just Alberta, but Manitoba, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, Yukon, and the Northwestern Territories. So all of these territories should be, by this party, removed from Canada to form a different state. And they had some success. They got a number of members who became members of the legislature on both the provincial and federal level. And there are offshoots and subsequent parties of this movement, even down to this day, although not having a great deal of impact. Now, obviously, there are parties like that all over the world. I mean, everybody knows about Parti Québécois, Scottish National Party, and so on. I don't need to mention those things. But the fact of the matter is that these organizations exist all over the world. Now, why is Hong Kong any different? I really can't see why Hong Kong is any different. The point I'm trying to make is that if you look at it historically, most of these movements peter out over some time, or they fail to have much impact. But by allowing them to have their say, you would be allowing dissidents to vent their frustration and anger, and government will, on the other hand, be being seen as being mature, open-minded, and confident. So both sides wins. It goes back to the point of my earlier point about whether we treasure having a mature and open society. That's the point. I mean, if we treasure a mature and open society, discussions of these things should just be allowed. If we don't, and I would suggest that they probably aren't in the mainland. Mature and open societies, these concepts aren't really treasured that much in mainland China. They might have a different perspective. But surely this is where one country, two systems comes in. We've got a different system, we've got a different history, a different tradition. So these things should be dealt with differently, I think.
Is the argument that the Hong Kong experience and the experience of China, the history is very, very different, and just because they do it in Canada doesn't mean it's right?
Excuse.
Well, yeah, but you know, it's not.
There's no difference. There are these separatist or independence movements anywhere in the world. I mean, sometimes it could be a major chunk of the country like Quebec. Sometimes it could be just a small part, like in the case of Hong Kong, it's just a tiny dot. Sometimes it could also be a tiny dot like Singapore breaking away from the Malaysian Union. All kinds of permutations and combinations have happened in history. You can't say, I don't think you can really justify this as being any different, Hugh. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, the defence, I guess, would be that it's not that long since the Civil War tore the whole country apart, and there was a century of dispute and discord in the country, and Taiwan is still there. The country is still kind of split.
Taiwan is a different story. It's totally out of Hong Kong's league.
Well, but from the big picture, it's still part of the same story. And Britain and Hong Kong has only just returned from being a colonial entity. So from a bigger picture, you have to.
But as time has got to do with it. I mean, I've just been back to China for just about 19 years, but what has the length of period got to do with it? I mean, Singapore was part of the Malaysian Union for only about 9 years before breaking away, becoming independent in 1965. So it's even shorter than this. What has that got to do with it? It seems to me that you're trying to make up excuse after excuse to justify the suppression of something which is happening all over the world and which is being treated as being, something which is pretty common and should be accommodated by modern civilized standards.
Okay, well, let's put that to Lawrence Ma, perhaps. He's from the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation. Go on.
I would have thought that in other countries, like in Canada's constitution, it probably haven't got a specific article to say that any of these provinces is not an inalienable part of the Republic of Canada. But in our basic law, it is quite specific to that respect. So I can only offer a legal point of view why the registration of the party, national party, is prohibited. Because if the government has made an administrative decision allowing the registration of a party in direct contravention of Article 1, then it would have conducted an administrative error, and which would be reviewable.
Bowen?
Yeah, I see what you mean. No problem, Lawrence. I'm a lawyer. I'm a Canadian lawyer. I haven't actually checked up your point about whether there's any provisions as to the inalienability of the provinces. There may be, There may not be, I don't know. But I think that's beside the point. The point is that constitutions are a written document. And constitutions as written documents all over the world are subject to change. They can be changed. It's not, cast in stone or iron and once and for all that kind of thing. Any constitution, even if it provides for the inalienability, there are still many other possibilities.
Sorry, let Carol Peterson come in here.
Yeah, if I could just interject for a moment, I think it is very important to remember that when we're talking about sedition or an offense of sedition that might implement Article 23, even when the Hong Kong government was trying to get their national security bill through, when they were asked, would it be sedition to criticize either the Constitution of Hong Kong or the Constitution of mainland China and to suggest amendments, Hong Kong government was adamant, of course not. That would not be an offense. So the fact that something that Article 1 does say, that Hong Kong is an inalienable part of the People's Republic of China, doesn't mean that you can't criticize that or suggest that should be changed. I can't imagine that any law of sedition that this Hong Kong government would propose would make that an offense.
Well,
so it still goes back to the fact that the basic law doesn't prohibit you from suggesting changes.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Carol just said. You don't need to look at Section 2 of Section 9 of the Crimes Ordinance. I've got it right in front of me right now. I mean, it says all those things which Carol just mentioned. You cannot be called seditious just because you think that the government has been in a wrong, or you propose certain things which can remedy or improve situations, or the administration of justice, there are certain parts that are in error and so on. I mean, these things cannot be regarded as seditious. But going back to Lauren's point, I think he was talking more about whether the fact that you are advancing the idea of Hong Kong becoming independent. Now, that's not criticizing the government or the cause or any organs of the government, but advocating independence. Now, that is whether that is allowable under the inalienability clause, which he was trying to evoke in Section 1 of the People's Constitution. But that is not directly. I mean, well, we still don't have Article 23 right now. Okay.
No, look, Bowen, you're taking it too far. What I'm saying is to prevent the registration of the party, not preventing you from speaking, to prevent the registration of the party, the government has to make an administrative decision prohibiting it from registration, and it has to do so because it has to comply with Article 1 of the Basic Law. That's what I'm saying. That's what the government is doing, and I'm not saying that you have no right to speak about it as under the current regime at all. Don't get the two mixed up.
Okay, well,
I do not disagree with you on the point that the government might have the ability to stop registration of that particular party, subject to court's decision, of course. I mean, I don't know if they're going to appeal this or they're going to take it for judicial review. They may do, and if they do, the court may agree with your stance or they may disagree with you. But that's not what I want to focus on. You see, the thing is, they even if you ban them from being registered as a party, surely there must be hundreds of other ways to organize the activities. You don't really need to have a registered company. That's just one form or one venue of carrying out the activities.
That's right,
I'm afraid we're out of time. I'm sorry, Professor Peterson. The debate will have to go on another time. Maybe we will return to the topic, but we are really out of time now. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Carol Peterson from the University of Hawaii. Bowen, thank you very much indeed for a very interesting call, provocative call. Thank you to Lawrence Ma, barrister, and to Avery Ng. Avery, thank you, Chairman of the Legal Social Democrats. Wanted to turn finally today at 27 minutes past 9 to the movie 10 Years. A public screening in many locations around town will be taking place tonight of this controversial film, which is set 10 years in the future, a dystopian future distinctly for Hong Kong. Joining us for comment is Lisa Leung, Associate Professor in the Department of Cultural Studies at Lingnan University. Professor Leung, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Have you seen the movie? What do you make of the movie?
I thought it's quite a gripping movie to start with because there are quite a few gripping images. But I think those are, I would agree that it kind of catches some of the worst fears of that has been harboring amongst us in Hong Kong. But I think it's a well worth attempt to try to remind us or to challenge us to think of things that we want to preserve, before they, die, so to speak.
The organisers, of course, they said after the screenings tonight there's going to be this question and answer session, isn't there, with the producers of the film, and in a sense that's almost more important to them than watching the film itself. They really want to provoke discussion, don't they?
And I think that's pretty much the main point of all those 5 movies. It's not really to incite kind of call for independence or rise of local identity, but rather to challenge us to rethink, what are the values, what are the core values that we do preserve in Hong Kong, and how could we, step up discussion amongst members of the public to try to monitor and keep guard on what we really hold and cherish, as important in Hong Kong.
And realistically, there are going to be more movies like this, aren't there? Now, I mean, the makers didn't expect it to be anything like this success. It's taken everyone by surprise. But us with anything in life, when you have something that's successful, other people will try and copy this, won't they?
Well, I mean, yes, I think that's a part of copycatting that I like to see, because I think this is something about freedom of expression that I think, you guys have been discussing earlier on. And with the fact that, today marks a lot of closures of TV stations and, newspapers, I think, this is a part of the territory that we really have to safeguard and preserve.
It's interesting because this movie is not been. It was shown in cinemas for a while, but one or two, but then they stopped pretty soon. But nonetheless, in this day and age, it can still get a large audience, can't it? I'm sure there'll be huge numbers of people at the different screenings tonight, and almost sort of bypass the regular distribution channels.
This is, I think, what some of the newer age, Hong Kong producers are trying to do. Not just producing the film themselves, but to stage that in different areas in Hong Kong to spark off discussions among members of the public. And I think that's a really good effort by some local young Hong Kong film producers.
And in a sense that the traditional way of doing movies and trying to get them into the cinemas and so on and traditional distribution channels is becoming obsolete.
I don't think so. There's just multiplication of viewing experience, and I think it's just in the sense of joking. I mean, since we haven't got the Avenue of Stars, why don't we promote these things as a kind of event for tourists? Even I think it shouldn't be just directed at Hong Kong members of the public, but to kind of promote it as a tourist event.
Okay, well, we should mention if you want to watch 10 Years the movie tonight, it does have English subtitles. In fact, I just checked this for a member of my family who's going. It does have English subtitles. There's a listing of the screenings in English on Hong Kong Free Press. If you look on Chinese on Apple Daily, also has a fairly comprehensive listing.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Go on, Lisa.
I think we need to, it's actually quite a welcoming kind of effort, to put it all in English subtitles that, it includes a lot of different, diverse, members of the public. And this is also what I cherish in those some of the films, to have South Asian images. As main characters in some of the films. That is a very inclusive attempt to remind us in Hong Kong that we are a multicultural community. It's not just about local Hong Kong Chinese.
Okay, well, Lisa Leung, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Lingnan University. Some more comments from Holden in emails, who says, on 10 Years, the movie 10 Years reminds me of the Clockwork Orange in the UK, banned in a couple of places. I think banned nationwide, actually, because of its content. Holden says, also on the earlier discussion, advocating independence and democracy with masks, bricks, shields, umbrellas and sticks. Very peaceful indeed.